We will not waver. We will not tire. We will not falter. And we will not fail.
The return to Taliban rule would condemn their country to brutal governance, international isolation, a paralyzed economy, and the denial of basic human rights to the Afghan people, especially women and girls.
The American people are weary of war without victory. Nowhere is this more evident than with the war in Afghanistan, the longest war in American history.
After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces.
We need more of something that is often in short supply here in our country: patience. I was struck during our briefing at the embassy in Kabul by a comment made by one of our U.S. aid workers who had recently returned from the Southeast and had met with a number of former Taliban, so-called former Taliban. And one of these former Taliban said, "Americans may have all the watches, but we have all the time." I think it's a lesson that we forget at our peril.
In December 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, bringing communism to this deeply Muslim nation.
Once the government forces, armed by their Soviet allies, were able to create an impregnable shield around Afghanistan's major cities, now the shield is crumbling, the soldiers are despondent.
Our view is that it's very important that all of the Soviet forces be promptly withdrawn from Afghanistan.
Just one day after the so-called conditional ceasefire, this is the reality in Kabul.
No one doubts now that the Mujahideen will take Kabul. The question is which faction will arrive here first, and whether they'll be looking to take the capital intact or to extract revenge for 14 years of bloody fighting.
Everybody thought they will wipe us out in 1 week, but we are addicted to freedom.
It's symbolized by the white flag of the Taliban militiamen, enforcing their vision of Islamic law. The penalties for disobedience, flogging, or even death. Their first edict: women must not work, must not be seen uncovered on the streets. Men must grow beards and pray 5 times a day.
That the Taliban was essentially created with Saudi money, Pakistani training, and US initiative.
In 2001, 6 months before 9/11, the Taliban ordered the ancient statues of Buddha to be destroyed, declaring them an offense to Islam.
The conflicts in Central Asia now are to do with oil, they're to do with gas, they're to do with narcotics, to do with money related to those 3 things. Where the United States has an interest, and some other Western countries, is in getting oil and gas out of Central Asia in a way that doesn't go through Iran. How do you do that? You run it through Afghanistan.
Enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. I gave Taliban leaders a series of clear and specific demands. Close terrorist training camps. Hand over leaders of the Al-Qaeda network.
Taliban authorities agreed to surrender Kandahar for the welfare of people.
The oppressed people of Afghanistan will know the generosity of America and our allies. As we strike military targets, we will also drop food, medicine, and supplies to the starving and suffering men and women and children of Afghanistan. But we condemn the Taliban regime.
Foreigners and expats come to Afghanistan and fall in love with it. I think that there's a certain Wild Westness to it that speaks to them.
Don't drink the yellow Kool-Aid.
I work right now with the United Nations. I'm clearly getting ready to go out for Halloween.
You know, they have pretty decent paying job, lack of accountability. They have good lifestyle when they're there.
Fuck, dude. You need to make sure he's okay. He's not fucking losing it.
We all kind of knew each other, all the expat scene, having dinners or having gigantic parties at ambassadors' house where they bring out like hundreds of bottles of alcohol, to going to the bars in Kabul and drinking till the break of dawn.
So this is a security checkpoint for parties that we throw in Kabul. I'm obviously the bitch on the fucking door who's, you know, telling everyone, you know, you can or you can't come in. We call it face control.
Why are you here?
See the show.
What show?
The way.
Why, guys?
Apparently I'm not paid.
Ooh.
Fucking special treatment.
Breaking rules, smoking weed, the kabubble, as we've kind of put it. We were still in high school despite being 30 or 40.
Transition is on track for December 2014.
All of them different. Yeah, fantastic in their own way.
I'm more optimism.
I'm just visiting like tourism.
Transition is on track. 2014. Is this a future? I don't know.
It's great. A little bit loud though, but it's great.
I have to say it's been a stimulating experiencing, letting people in, making sure everyone gets fished properly, and you know, haven't turned anyone away yet so far, so it's been a good crowd. So I'm going to go inside now and enjoy myself.
Contractor-tastic venue. I'm hoping to see some muscly men in t-shirts earning loads of money, keeping us safe.
We were just saying how amazingly determined you are to even keep filming at this moment of incredible drunkenness. I'm very impressed. Vostrovie.
Dude, I don't want the entrance filmed.
What's the ratio of men to women here, you think? Pretty about it.
They feel very welcome because there is this kind of idea of hospitality, you know, Afghan hospitality. They are quite hospitable, even if they don't want you there. You know, they'll be very hospitable.
When you look through this tomorrow, you'll be like, what was I filming? What? Why? And you will suffer.
No one refers to their city with love the way that Afghans refer to their city. They call it Kabul Jan, and which means my dear Kabul. Once you've been to Afghanistan, the next time you go, you could land blindfolded and it smells like Afghanistan. There's a dustiness, there is a petrol, there is a smell that is so familiar.
My first time coming to Kabul was December 2001. I wanted to go primarily for me. I mean, I was this vegetarian surfer, right, from Florida. I'd never set foot in the country. And when I saw Kabul at that time, demolished buildings everywhere, most people gone, empty as a city. I mean, you could walk down the middle of the street in the middle of the day and hear a car approaching from way back, walk to the side of the road, let the car pass, and walk back into the middle of the street. I mean, it was almost like a ghost town. It really seemed like a sort of, kind of proverbial tabla rasa, just white canvas. It clearly needs help, right? And maybe now we can do it better. Spent about a year working for a couple of different NGOs, having to go into refugee camps to talk to Afghans about education projects, health projects. And I think deep inside of me, there was this desire to want to help. With a lot of diaspora wanting to go back to your country, there was a desire for me to get to know that history of mine, that lineage of mine better.
When they first came, we were very optimistic to our future. We thought that we will be one of the countries like Germany or UK or any other countries. And there will be no fighting anymore. There will be no bad economy, there will be work, job opportunities, as it was. In the first years, yes, it was like that.
My name is Ahmad Zia Haidari. I've been working as a fixer with internationals since fall of Taliban regime. As you know, during the Taliban, there was much job opportunities in Kabul. Then one of my cousins, he used to work for the International Federation of Red Crescent Society. He was working there. Then he told me that, look, if you learn English, computer, so we can get you a good job. Work as a translator for the international media and journalists. Loads of journalists came into Kabul city. We went to the front line of Tora Bora with the journalists there. They were fighting Arab fighters, and that was the first time where the suicide attack happened, and we were not able to translate, and we did not know the word for suicide bomber. I took the photos, I got the whole story. Even there was only one eyewitness, an Afghan eyewitness who survived. I got the whole story from him, from A to Z.
After the US toppled the Taliban, the first Bonn conference got together to form the interim administration. All the warlords and commanders that fought in Kabul, hence the raison d'etre of the creation of the Taliban, were at that table to form that new government. But the Taliban was not at the table.
We debated about this at university. It was a mistake that in 2001, the government did not involve the Taliban, and this is why, and this is their right to fight against this government.
US and NATO was part of this tribal conflict. The first mistake, they brought back the warlords back on power. So the first mistake was that the people lost their faith, that they brought very bad people with a very bad background to the power.
The international engagement, the broader, the community that they called, which had, military, development, diplomats, journalists, artists, everybody. I mean, it was the biggest international intervention since the Second World War. There was 50 countries serving the military NATO-led operation there. There was 60 donors, foundations, development agencies that signed up to the Afghanistan Compact. The biggest donor had 43 lines of appropriation. That's the kind of money that was flooding into Afghanistan. I was a corporal in the Canadian military, an electronic warfare land tactical specialist. And my role at NATO in Afghanistan was as a political advisor. I was one of several political advisors supporting the senior civilian representative. That was sort of the counterpart to the commander of the NATO-led International Security Assistance Force, or ISAF. Socioeconomic development issues, contracting, and the impact of money. At one stage they called it money as a weapon system. I thought it was a legitimate intervention, a legitimate invasion. Of course, you know, the US was quite burnt. The whole world seemed to support that. There was a sense of morality on being there.
So since day one, as they came into Afghanistan, so they started taking revenge from one tribe, from Pashtuns. All the bombardment were happening in the Pashtun areas. They used different types of mother of the bomb and different types of the bomb in the Pashtun areas.
The president was Pashtun?
President was somebody who could not go to his village. Karzai was a Pashtun, is a Pashtun, but he was that weak Pashtun that he was not able to go to his village. He didn't have support of his people.
Hamid Karzai 1295 rai.
What people want, first of all, is peace, food, shelter, and then maybe somewhere down the road, the democracy. It's very natural. And if we cannot give them food and shelter, they don't care about democracy. We made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. I think we brought democracy and elections way too early. We have this tribal system. And if the leader of a tribe or of a group says, I am voting for this candidate, the entire tribe is going to vote for the candidate. So you can easily buy votes or make deals.
And then we hear things like that. That was pretty close. I guess you can't say you're confident that the ceasefire is being followed at this point.
So I arrived this morning, got into Kabul at 6 a.m.
It wasn't that I thought I could change Afghanistan. Part of it was I wanted to understand gender violence, and I wanted to do that by understanding different pieces of that puzzle.
What does she say happened?
She says that nothing happened. Yeah.
It definitely did play into my experience as a victim of gender violence. I was raped when I was 18. My sister was raped when she was 19. I was angry with how the world was not engaged in gender violence and women's rights. This was pre-UN Women. We didn't even have the UN Women set up at the time. I wanted to understand the scope of Afghan women and Afghan society, from, you know, what it meant to be women in prisons, to women in parliament, to, you know, female athletes, to this burgeoning group of female activists.
When I thought of Afghanistan, I literally thought of the Kite Runner. It was like basically mud brick houses on the hills, and that's where I expected to live, you know.
Beyond the bloodshed, beyond the burqa.
So I came to Afghanistan to work on a TV series called The Extreme Tourist.
Discover a place you thought you knew. Afghanistan.
This is a famous folk song from America. Yo, Vanilla, kick it one time, boy. The
Extreme Tourist Afghanistan was a television show that was sort of a adventure, sort of travel show / comedy in Afghanistan, if you could kind of believe it. We entered a bodybuilding competition. We went and met witch doctors. We tried following snow leopards. We hung out with one of the comedians in Kandahar who pretty much almost tried to kill us. So we kind of looked for the light moments in Afghanistan and had the time of my life.
For the people that earn money in Afghanistan, the war is about money. It's very clear. If you look at all the security companies, they're making millions every year in Afghanistan, providing security for the diplomatic corps, for the reconstruction effort, for the NGOs. I sell civilian armored vehicles, mainly Toyota Land Cruisers. I have my target group of customers. I enjoy very much doing the business with law enforcement, aid workers, the United Nations and Western governments. This business has, after 9/11, has skyrocketed. I've been confronted with the question, am I a war profiteer? Yeah, of course I am, but there's too many other people who are also profiteering.
This is not an entry round. This is not entry, this is exit. You know, this is what, it hits the arm war and then it has to go somewhere. The bullet splashes because it's lead, and then you have all these little deformations that is like the shit coming back.
I didn't enter this business because I saw an opportunity to make a lot of money. This business developed into what it is when I was already doing it.
Our vehicle is protected from all sides with armor steel, against automatic rifle fire, against IEDs, bombs, against mines and hand grenades.
That's as good as it gets. They were always hoping for the solution to the violence. And until you reach that solution, you have to protect all the people that come to rebuild the country. So with every NGO, there is probably 2 PSD who are protecting him. And then people needed armored cars. In the end, basically everyone in Afghanistan had an armored car. Cannons, tanks, drones. That's the war machinery, not me.
So in the first couple of years, it was very broad. It was working with the deaf community within the women's prisons, with the women's heroin rehab clinic, and then just kind of broadly with women's education. The idea being, what are the projects that are easy to implement, Afghan-led, are sustainable, or that have an impact? So we're in Kandahar city, and this is the first time that I've been to Kandahar. The interesting thing with Kandahar is, a beautiful city from our courtyard of the hotel, but I have to wear a burqa from the moment that I leave the airport. The burqa is not just for cultural reasons, it's also to disguise me as a foreigner. The main issue not being the Taliban, but being kidnappings. Perfect. All right, I'm ready for Kandahar. It's a very frustrating garment to be wearing, stifling hot, especially if you're sitting in a car because there's just no air circulation. So obviously very difficult to see out of. You have no peripheral vision, and it's also just very difficult to walk in because as you walk, it wants to shift. I obviously don't have the knack of wearing a burqa quite yet. The prisoners seem to be very well cared for. They're actually building things like visiting halls and things for the prisoners. They're building a playground for the kids. They're actually trying to make it livable. It's humane. One of them was a young woman, she's about 20. So there's 5 wives, she's the last. The husband is 65 years old. She was married to him 4 years ago when she was 16, so he would have been 61. Only the 4th and 5th wife are alive. The first 3 were killed by the husbands. She herself showed us knife scars all over her body. I haven't done anything other than try to hear their story and try to share their story and try to be empathetic and understand what they're going through. What do you do when you can't help? And your offer of help seems pretty meaningless when these women, what they're going through. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Because I'm from Kandahar, in our culture is all the girls, they marry when they are 18, 17, 19. So, and that was the idea that I have to marry. And making art is not important at all. I mean, I was not allowed to have any kind of job or work. My bachelor study was not completed and I was in my third year just starting, and then the idea was like, okay, the girl is grown now, she has to marry. Then boom, never allowed anymore to go back, and then already was planned for me different life. I thought art is gone from my life.
Our troops and our NATO allies are performing heroically in Afghanistan, but I have argued for years that we lack the resources to finish the job. That's why I've proposed an additional $1 billion in non-military assistance each year.
In a war, culture becomes oftentimes the greatest weapon that gets used, particularly by Western nations. Just looking at the US embassy itself, they had this whole public diplomacy department. And so within that, they supported civil society activities. Within civil society, there was arts and culture. They were wanting to feed a certain propaganda about how their invasion, how their intervention into this country has helped. So they were just funding everything. They were funding films, exhibitions, festivals.
I'm so happy that now we have our own Afghan rock bands in Afghanistan for the first time, and it's very important, and I'm so appreciate the organizer.
از یکی از دوستان شنیده بودم درباره جشنواره، یکی از دوستان که در یک گروپ هستن. علاقه‌مندی خاص به موزیک راک دارم و وقتی که از فستیوال خبر شدم بسیار خوشحال شدم و گفتم باید اشتراک کنم در این.
There's a big change since 2001 and since the war, and now we are like having rock groups in Afghanistan. They're performing, and it's a big achievement for the youth of Afghanistan. In terms of social changes, there's a lot of social change in Afghanistan, and it was a big achievement for the international community. But when it comes to the infrastructure, there's not so much done.
Almost anything anyone threw at them, they were giving money for it. It became a part of Western propaganda. And so I was curious to introduce graffiti. So we did this little one-day workshop, and later we did this amazing mural project that was a part of it. That was really great.
I suddenly hear about a workshop, a graffiti workshop, which is called Wall Load.
I'm Malina Sulaiman, and I have graduated my school 4 years before, and I have done painting, but it's the first chance to give me that I will do something street art.
I'm not an expert on wall painting, man, but some of it, I think is quite good. It shows a lot of potential for what they could potentially do on a wall. I mean, just with the geographic shapes they were doing before. I mean, you take something like that, something simple, right? Circles and squares and filled in dots and whatnot. I mean, you do that on a wall, a bullet-riddled wall in Kabul somewhere. I mean, you could actually, highlighting and accenting the bullet holes or something, and expanding them and adding colors to them and whatnot. So you're taking this thing and actually completely transforming, what it means, what it was about, and kind of and obviously beautifying things.
For me, it was a kind of very special moment, especially first time I was working directly with foreigners. To see directly they are involved, but also they are really giving motivation and valuing our artistic practice. It felt like I'm not alone. It gave us the hope that our voice is listened by outsider.
But what ended up happening at some point then was I started to get phone calls from these development enterprises, the UN, Creative Associates, which is a for-profit, one of those Beltway bandits from DC, contacted me saying, hey, we've got this women's rights campaign. We think graffiti would be great. The whole point of wanting to bring graffiti or seeing how graffiti could develop in Afghanistan was more to see if it could be this real kind of insurgent activity, not as a sort of public service announcement for development projects.
That was the moment I remember, like, what I did, this workshop, which was in Kabul, this is exact right tool to demonstrate or protest for my right as a woman in Kandahar city, because the women are not allowed to come to the galleries to see the artwork. So that was one of the reasons also that I start to draw on the walls. Normally what I did, I always walk around the street, and to see if there is no one, then I can draw on the walls. Because in Kandahar city, in that time, the safety was even more horrible than Kabul, especially for a woman. So when I was outside to make this drawing, I was a lot afraid, but maybe someone put acids on my face, because that was happening a lot on that time, that Taliban threw the acids on the woman's face. Stand in front of wall in more than 2 minutes or 3, maximum like 3. I just look around, okay, no one is there. Take out this can and then draw very symbolic drawing really fast, and then sometimes it was not even complete. I saw like, okay, someone is coming, okay, we have to run.
Yeah, I'm back and I couldn't do anything. I just started, but I see there were lots of boys. So I have to back, but I will try some other day and I will go back. This night, I will try to. Thank you.
It was a fun time. I became part of the Skaterstan crew, which we kind of just drove around on motorbikes and bringing skateboards to kids in the streets. That was probably the best feeling that I ever had in Skaterstan. I really loved being a teacher. I used to teach journalism class, photography classes, art and drama, as well as teaching skateboarding. Yeah, I was like a kid again, basically, is the best way to put it. You know, the roads are really shit, so, you know, and also you got open sewers, so skateboards often go into open sewers and somebody has to go grab them, so 100 Afghanis to go pick up that, skateboard full of shit. I was very proud to be part of this Afghanistan where we were bringing parts of our culture. We were bringing something new to Afghanistan.
So this is the spot about, well, exactly 1 year ago that we almost died. My driver, Shah Mohammed, was taking us up to Panjshir, lost control of his little Toyota Corolla and smashed into this barrier, knocking it down into the cliff below.
A year later, I rolled up with my giant bike case and I rode my bike around Panjshir. Like the first rides, I was just scared. Like I was just like, I knew I was doing something I shouldn't be doing, and so I was like literally riding like this tiny little area and then being like, okay, like, is everything all right? Like,
I should feel good. Pretty disappointed. Looks like Andaman Pass is not going to happen. So about 10 minutes down the road, an old man with a donkey came by, which everybody's been stopping and saying hi and asking what we're doing, and he kept saying, no, you can't go up, you can't go up. So I'm going to Andaman. He said, no, you can't go. And he kind of was making the sign of guns, and he's like, no. When we talked through with the translator, turns out that it's not just some Nuristani land disputes going back and forth between shepherds and whatever. It's actually, there's some Nuristani gun running.
I said, no, it's dangerous. You know, there were so many foreigners who were killed and kidnapped in this neighborhood.
I think it just reminds you that it is Afghanistan. I mean, at the end of the day, foreigners aren't traveling like a tourist. And I have to remember that, you know, every time I've ever gotten complacent in Afghanistan, something has smacked me in the face. It's kind of shifted over from being a challenge, an adventure, and something incredibly positive to something that is potentially very, very dangerous and something that has more of a feel of Russian roulette.
Men and boys, you know, are on bikes all over the place. I mean, you know, bikes are ubiquitous. You know, they're a common way for traveling. But girls do not ride bikes in Afghanistan. The reason women aren't on bikes in Afghanistan is because the patriarchy does not want women to have freedom of mobility. But if women are going to make the choice to ride bikes, I'm going to encourage the shit out of that. I returned in the spring with the first bikes, 500 pounds of donated cycling gear, and started documenting them and training with them. What I felt they were doing, which was completely change the fabric and culture of their society. They created their own movement, their own team eventually. It was fully female-led, female-grown.
The girls are so fantastic, and I can't think of anything I'd rather be doing in Afghanistan than work with this team.
They started the first races for women in the whole of Afghanistan, and then eventually that connected. I brought the girls from the national team in Kabul to meet, and we ran a training camp in Bamiyan so we could connect the two groups. But the girls in Bamiyan, that was fully female-led, grown. When the mullahs spoke out against them in Bamiyan, the girls didn't ask men to advocate for them. They went themselves and met with the mullahs themselves and said, okay, why do you have a problem with this? You know, okay, it's the clothes, okay, well, and we will adjust. And, they did and continued to ride and continued to race. And I was literally witnessing history in Afghanistan with Muslim women on bikes, and it was incredible.
The security situation in Afghanistan has been changing, certainly over the last few years, but I have never felt that I had a problem here. I am comfortable working in Afghanistan as a foreign woman.
The first time that I got to ride with women was huge, and I remember riding with women and, boys, as boys do in Afghanistan, throwing rocks and, okay, fine, you just kind of deal with it. But I remember going for a ride. It was a long 3-hour ride past Karga Lake up into the hills. And we stopped to have a picnic, get some water, turn around, and there's this steep, winding road back down. So I'm at the back and I'm watching these girls ahead of me, and it's kind of winding down so I can kind of see them ahead of me throughout the ride. And I see these boys at the side of the road and I can see them throwing things. I'm like, damn it. They're probably throwing rocks and these girls are gonna run over the rocks and they're skinny little racing tires. They're gonna crash and nothing happens. They just keep whoosh, 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 right past them. I'm like, oh, they must have missed. And I ride past and they're all cheering as they ride past. They're not yelling at them, they're cheering and they're throwing fucking flowers at the girls. And I just start crying.
The situation is increasingly perilous. It's been more than 7 years since the Taliban was removed from power, yet war rages on. Insurgents control parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Attacks against our troops, our NATO allies, and the Afghan government have risen steadily. Most painfully, 2008 was the deadliest year of the war for American forces. And to the terrorists who oppose us, my message is the same. We will defeat you. And as Commander-in-Chief, I have determined that it is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan.
So when Obama came in, the good war, Afghanistan, he coupled it with a time frame. If you look at the logistics of deploying troops, creating bases, creating all that structure and putting all the money in, 2009, 2014, and then the period where you have to redeploy all the troops, retrograde all that material. So you're talking about 5 years, which needed to be waited out by the Taliban. And you're absolutely right. We told the enemy when we were leaving.
This kind of monster rear its head where you're dealing with NGO politics, you're dealing with donor politics, geopolitics. You say, look, with that money, I can support 10 projects really well, or I can support 30 projects and they're gonna be You know, very often they'll say, oh no, but we want quality projects, but we want 30. Ah, okay, you didn't actually hear anything I just said, did you?
Back in the United States, everybody thought, oh my gosh, the hard part is being in Afghanistan, and that's not the hard part at all. The hard part is the fundraising. The hard part is getting people to give a shit. If they give money to UNICEF and Amnesty and UN or whatever, like, okay, great, you're paying people's salaries. If you can give money to projects on the ground, that actually has an impact. This is what all of the international aid agencies, organizations, they all have this so wrong. Every single one of them is like a 1 year, a 5 year, a 10-year plan. Their grant cycles are all based around this. If you want to change society, it's generational. No one wants to fund something that they may not see the benefit of.
Imagine you're in this kind of desert landscape with the desert that has like the hard earth, hard cracked ground. And you're there with this big bucket of water. And that big bucket of water is everything that happened in these last 20 years. All the money that went into arts and culture and the police and education and everything. And you take that big bucket of water and you just dump it on the ground. So that water is gonna run and spread, right, really wide and cover a large swath of ground. But it's going to evaporate before it penetrates into the earth. Before it actually gets in to nourish that ground and soften that soil so that something can grow, it's going to evaporate. That's what happened with Afghanistan, in my opinion.
So the history, if we look back into the history, like as much as you increase the military forces in here, so that raised the number of their deaths and casualties. They changed the Humvees into MRAP. They said that these are anti-IEDs and stuff. When they were changing tactics, but the conflict was getting hot and hotter by increasing troops.
Taliban, I call them murderers, I call them terrorists, I call them the enemy, simply because they do not differentiate between the enemy and the collateral. So they kill, and when they decide to send a suicide bomber, that suicide bomber will carry out his mission no matter where and no matter who gets killed.
In August 2009, you could drive in and out, and the US Embassy, USAID was next door, US Embassy was there, ISAF was there. A big truck pulled up, allegedly en route to the US, and the truck had 500 kilograms of explosives.
In broad daylight, a Taliban suicide bomber has struck a critical site for international troops, the command headquarters of the US and NATO in Kabul.
There was this one boy, Nawab, he was brilliant at doing kickflips. He was working at the front of ISAF selling bracelets and candies and gum and whatever. And he saw this young suicide bomber, and he decided to confront the young suicide bomber.
The blast killed and injured dozens of Afghans who were outside the compound. It's a devastating scene of destruction.
When the young kid was determined that he wanted to kill American soldiers, Nawab decided to tell the security guards that were working at the front that this guy was a suicide bomber.
And it blew out the entire front part of the base. But it was like 7:30 in the morning, so we were all in our accommodation brushing our teeth, and it went boom, and everything went to dust.
He took out Nawab because Nawab was the closest. I remember getting that phone call, and all I wanted to do was just come back. It was devastating to hear. I went straight up to where he was, and I helped wash his body and prepare his body for going to the grave. It was really hard.
After that incident, I couldn't hear bombs anymore. It was totally fucked up. There'd be a big blast Friday mornings, which was a typical time, and everybody would be in bunkers. I didn't wake up for them, and I didn't ever hear them after that. It was really weird. But just doing a lot of processing about why I went there, what happened, and why did I stay so long, you know? Some people don't think that's normal.
That's why we...
Wanted dead or alive, dead or alive. Work much more than 3 hours. Wanted dead or alive. How much are these? $10. Wanted dead or alive, dead or alive.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden.
Within minutes of that statement, thousands of people in Washington were streaming towards the White House.
I do remember when Osama bin Laden was killed, jubilation outside the White House and American flags, etc., etc.
We finally got the world's better without him, and that we can start to bring our troops home today.
You know, for me, to be perfectly honest, the death of Osama bin Laden was something that kind of touched me to some extent in the way that that an actor or a singer or a band that you kind of grew up with dies. It goes against the grain of what a lot of people think. I felt kind of a wave of nostalgia.
My reaction to bin Laden's death was, why are we continuing with this war in Afghanistan? But for me, I mean, personally, I just wanted to know where the body was. I wanted proof that they actually got him.
In the 9/11 attacks, which one of these attackers were Afghan? Which one of them? None of them was Afghan. And then if you blame bin Laden for this, bin Laden was your friend. You funded him, you trained him, you armed him to fight your ancient enemy, Russia.
The number of civilians killed in Afghanistan's decade-long war has risen to a record high for the 5th straight year. The finding is in stark contrast to NATO's assessment that it has been a remarkably successful year on the battlefield.
There's a period about 5 months in 2012, there wasn't one complex attack on Kabul. And I was like, we might have won the war. Like, we actually thought for this 5-month period that there was not one, like it was just calm, you know? Well, I think if you track the funding that has come into Afghanistan over the last 12 years, it is strongly correlated both in geography and amounts with the number of boots on the ground and the amount of military with each. So, you know, everyone has their province they support as opposed to looking at this country as a whole. And the problem with that vulnerability is as the international troops leave, the development dollar starts to decline as well. You know, in the last 4 years, countries were injecting billions and billions of dollars. That money comes with conditions and mutual accountability.
Now Camp Price and Helmand is being flattened. The bulldozers have moved in and equipment is being moved out. The blast barriers that once protected them and had become a memorial for fallen comrades have also come down. The British withdrawal has begun.
It's not my country, it's not my nation. I mean, I've come here to do a job. I mean, we've lost guys out here, yeah, and they've done their bit, and the place is a much better place because of it. But for me, it's just job done, get home.
On the last day, when everything's loaded, the last vehicles are about to go and the last helicopters fly out, and we leave this place, it will be quite a nice feeling. It will be, I'm not going to miss this place.
In the 12 years since they've been here, many lives have been lost. Hundreds more have been changed forever. Asked if it was worth it, one British commander said history will judge us.
First question is, why is this project so successful? What was it like before, and why is it successful now?
The ultimate goal of any NGO should be to work itself out of existence, right? It shouldn't be needed at some point. Eventually, there should be enough schools and enough education programs in Afghanistan that everyone has the access to education, and so the NGOs who are working on education can wipe their hands and go to somewhere else where there's maybe not enough schools or whatever. But that's never going to be the case. They're never going to actually work themselves out of work.
The aid industry serves the aid industry. If they actually did their job, then they would be out of a job. Of course, they can do work on the ground, but they are spending such a huge percentage of their marketing budget to continue to bring in money. So they can continue to do the work, to then have the photos to continue to bring in the money.
Then you had the military start to actually engage in humanitarian and development work. That's when you started to see, in the years that I was in Afghanistan, militarized humanitarianism. And so then what happens is that the NGOs, that even though they're all just a part of this same machine, the perception of people towards the role of the NGOs and the military starts to get blurred and starts to mesh together, right? And this was, I think, a fundamental shift.
The fact that the military-industrial complex and the aid organizations are in bed together. Because the aid organizations sure as shit don't think they are.
There's war industry, there's NGOs, there is humanitarian activity. I think one cannot live without the other.
This method that the US has used over and over again of having the Afghan soldiers or the Afghan militias calling in the attacks repeatedly created mistakes of wedding parties being bombed, convoys of people going to weddings being bombed. Everything that's going on here is completely fucked up, and there's no way that the system that is in place right now for trying to stabilize Afghanistan is gonna work.
If you go to the provinces, if you sit with the people of those villages and share their stories, then you can see what this Afghan security forces has done in those provinces, what kind of war crimes they did, shooting children, shooting kids, shooting houses. So of course, if somebody keeps shooting me and killing me, of course, even if it's me or you or anyone else, they're going to join the Taliban.
There was this Taliban math, so if you kill one civilian, they and their village and their family and friends will become Taliban empathetic or Taliban. So, killing a civilian means you can create 10 Taliban, or 10 people that will support the Taliban, or 10 people that will not tell when the Taliban puts a roadside bomb when your convoy is going to go there, right? That's what the security benefits of Protect the Population is supposed to be about. The problem is when you get into the rural south and the tribal south, it's not always easy to tell who's who, who's empathetic for who, who's the enemy. Is that child, I want to give some candy or are they going to blow up? It was really that difficult to figure out.
Waiting for that prize. I need to know what it's worth.
Okay, sure. Bye.
Good luck. I wish you all the best. And stay in contact, yeah?
Okay, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. I'll see you in Holland.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
امروز آمدیم تمام دوستای خود یک بای کنم، شاید بعضشان هنر فرق خنا میکنن بازم در یک طرف برن. خب میخواستم آخرین دفعه ببینم، زیاد خوشم هستم اما در قلب بسیار جگرخون هستم، چرا که نمیدانم در اوجا چی خواد کردم امروی مردم بیگانه. و من تمام دوستای خود زیاد دوست دارم. دگه گفتنی نیست، بند کو دیگه. بند کو.
You took a big risk.
Coming to here.
Leaving Afghanistan.
When I saw myself that I was very threatened, that I'm not able anymore to work as an artist, and especially when my family, they saw this, they said like, okay, we have just one thing, we are gonna let her to marry. No matter whose proposal is coming, as soon as possible, we just let her marry and then all the story is over and finished. When I got this opportunity coming to the Netherlands, I even wasn't know where is the Netherlands, how it looks like, and where is it. I just wanted to go out of Afghanistan and to be safe.
فکر میکنم بسیار سفر دور و دراز نیست، اما من فکر میکنم واقعا بسیار دور و دراز شده، چون که فکرم تشویش دولش نمیره و از خداوند تقاضا دارم که همه چیز خوب شود و بخیر تا نیدرلند صحیح سلامت هستم.
More and more conversations with taxi drivers and people during elections times, they'd be pointing to different candidates and saying, you see that candidate? That person killed X number of people in my village in so-and-so year, or that candidate is connected to so-and-so warlord. So then I was like, well, these are the jihadi gangsters, right? And so that's when then I made these kind of faux parliamentary campaign posters.
Let's say we run some more of these. Hold up for a minute.
One thing that I did for my own protection and also to kind of make it more open to different ethnicities and different people. On my face, I put a black circle, and in the text inside was, your favorite jihadi here. So people could kind of put in who it is that they wanted. The slogan was, vote for me, I've done jihad and I'm rich.
So it's the month of Ramadan, Iftar being the time of day just after sunset when everyone breaks their fast for the day. And so there's a mad scramble off the streets, usually up to the half hour before everyone's going home or going to their family's house to break their fast. And so the streets are at the emptiest time that they will be for the entire day. So that's why we'll have lots of nice empty streets. For a period of time, we don't have a lot of posters, so we'll, looking to get them all up within an hour or so.
We printed out a bunch and went around and just put, a few up in strategic places around town. And sure enough, the next day already, you could tell that people had tried to rip them off. Even the night of, we had just gotten rid of the glue bucket and everything, and we got stopped at a checkpoint, and one of the police at the checkpoint there had one of the posters that someone had ripped off, I guess, while it was still wet. and taken to them and was asking if we knew anything about it. And all of us who were in the car there with glue on our hands everywhere was like,
It's a close call, but it's finally official. Ashraf Ghani is president.
طالبان به تصحیح از صراحت حکم مندرج ماده 61 قانون اساسی کشور محترم محمد اشرف غنی را که
With Ghani becoming president, the corruption got even worse. This is when the Americans and the internationals decided to step back.
One of the biggest challenges in that operation and in the history of military warfare was logistics. So you really had to go to Karachi port in Pakistan and through private companies, and the scale of this was immense. It was something like 6,000 to 8,000 truck missions a month. They would expend $1.5 million in ammunition a month just trying to fight their way through the convoys. There were protection rackets because once you hit Afghanistan, it was all Afghan warlords that were controlling the roads. And so they would either fight through the roads or they would pay the Taliban for safe passage, to the point where if you see, testimony of Hillary Clinton to the Foreign Relations Committee saying, we are one of the major sources of funding to the Taliban. It was at a time where the war became quite financially incentivized. So much money is going off to the insurgents that you're trying to fight that most commanders and most ambassadors and most of the international community are like, how are you going to solve this equation with this endemic corruption? The way that we spent money there was on burn rates, spend.
I think corruption is now, how we can say, it's like an oxygen we breathe. Without oxygen, you're gonna die, right? So for the whole system, corruption is like oxygen. If there is no oxygen, they're gonna die in a day.
One of the things that you would always hear in Kabul from the taxi drivers was having to give tea money to the policemen at checkpoints. Simultaneously, what was starting to happen at that time was Taliban insurgents, they were starting to do coordinated attacks on government buildings, ministries, and things like that, wearing police uniforms. I started to get fascinated by these two things that were happening, and so I was like, okay, well, first of all, let's flip the script on paying a bribe. And second of all, how easy is it really to put yourself into a position of power through uniform? We walked out with, I think, 3 or 4 police uniforms. So what I wanted to do was set up a fake checkpoint on the streets of Kabul and give money back to motorists rather than asking them for money. They said, we'll send a real policeman with you for your protection. We're like, no, we don't need it. But they sent one anyway. I stopped cars, I checked their paper against the license, I opened trunks, where are you coming from, where are you going, the whole 9 yards. And after the little spiel, then I would offer them 100 Afghani, which was equivalent to about $2. And I would offer them the money with an apology on behalf of the police, the government of Afghanistan. One of the real kickers, which was really great, was then the real policeman comes up to me and is just like, oh, it was really fun, I'm glad I came, but you gave all that money out, and what about me? So the whole story being about police corruption then came right back with it. And so I had, I think, about 200 apps maybe left that I gave him at the end.
I have a lot of great friends in the government of Afghanistan, but there was also a lot of officials in that government in senior places and their relatives that operated like an organized crime network. It was very much a kleptocratic regime, right? I saw a contract with something like 10 subcontracts. I'm like, where the hell is that school or whatever,
We did many stories about this. So the first contractor was American. So it was like admit that like was 10 million. So the second contractor gave it back to 7 million. Third contractor, another American, ha 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 ha. The very last contractor who really did the work, it was $1.5 million. From 10, it came to 1.5.
I don't know if you ever heard people say, wow, the Taliban just burned that school down. You had a situation where you're like, actually, no, either the school wasn't built because of or the contractor burnt it down.
Everything is getting worse, nothing is getting better. The warlords who still control everything, directly and indirectly. It was the international community who made these worms into dragons. So now these dragons are out of control. And international communities see them and they know they have proofs, they have everything, but they can't do anything about it. From my point of view, these traitors, warlords in the government are a bigger risk than the Taliban for the future of this country.
There's a density of tenseness in the streets. There's a lack of trust in the streets. It's almost like anyone and everyone is a suspect and is suspicious of someone else. And so the police, forget it. I mean, first of all, there's even more checkpoints now than there were before.
Here in Kabul, we had NDS, like the intelligence services, all active, well equipped, well armed, well trained. We had police force, we had armies. But still in Kabul, every day the level of crimes was going higher and higher and higher.
In 2014-15, you saw a huge spike in insecurity, one of the most dangerous years. But it wasn't like Taliban insurgency, it was crime. It was like tons of crime, tons of criminal activity.
Kidnapping.
Yeah, money-seeking kind of crime because everybody lost their jobs very quickly. We created a huge false economy on our presence.
In Kabul, we had quite a big tension, like every day, as I said, magnet IEDs, target killing, assassinations. I always had AK-47 with me, loaded, one finger on the trigger, another hand on the safety catch. It was like, let's say, like a front line. So I never felt safe at all, especially with clients, without clients, because you never know who's gonna attack you, where, and how. And it was happening every day.
What do you got? What's in the bag? It's guns. Guns, right? Guns are. Yeah. We'll need guns today,
Just
right?
in case. Most of the bars had to close because there wasn't enough business, and people were generally afraid of the Taliban and the Taliban coming back. By the end of it, like come 2015, there was really no scene.
I got any like special little things?
Just in case, you know, if you want to go drum action.
Okay.
Good evening. From Bagram Air Base. There will be difficult days ahead. The enormous sacrifices of our men and women are not over. But tonight I'd like to tell you how we will complete our mission and end the war in Afghanistan. We will shift into a support role as Afghans step forward. Afghans are responsible for the security of their nation, and we build an equal partnership between two sovereign states. As we do, our troops will be coming home.
war's over, by the way.
The war's over?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America.
I just went to the Oval Office and found this beautiful letter from President Obama. And we won't even tell the press what's in that letter.
Negotiations between the Americans and the Taliban started, and I think what triggered this is that the Americans understood that with the Ghani government, you cannot continue working. It was, let's get out of here.
I think meeting is a great thing. I think that meeting with, you're talking about war. There are meetings with war, otherwise wars would never end. We want to get out.
The peace deal, I mean, the Taliban didn't have to give anything. They got 5,000 people out of jail. They never had to talk to the Afghan government.
Finally, I can announce with great pride the beginning of intra-Afghan peace negotiations. We've been negotiating with them for quite some time, getting along with them.
We're all saying, oh, Taliban 2.0, and I'm like, I'd like to see a bit more where that's coming from.
The Taliban should also understand that the Afghanistan of today is very different than it was 20 years ago.
Taliban fighters have been rapidly gaining ground in Afghanistan, capturing 5 provincial capitals in an offensive that's moving at an alarming rate. The latest 3 cities to be seized fell within hours of each other. A resident described the city as total chaos.
Right now, the provinces are falling quickly into the hands of Taliban. We don't know exactly what is going to happen because the Afghan forces are not fighting. I am really anxious about this situation and I don't know what is going to happen in few weeks. The only thing we can do is just trying to make the documents in order to escape from the country and leave from the country if anything happens.
They always say, well, things were good with the Russians during the Soviet time because at least no one was hungry. So everyone had rations every month. During the Taliban time, everyone speaks like, well, at least during the Taliban time, there was security. And eventually people are going to say, well, at least during the American time, there was money. What is next? That's going to be curious. Who's going to be curious to see what's next?
Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
Can you please clarify what they have told you about whether that will happen or not?
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion. But the likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
In a stunning turn of events, we are getting these pictures from inside Afghanistan's presidential palace, where Taliban fighters can be seen occupying the premises and sitting at the desk President Ashraf Ghani relinquished just hours ago.
When I first saw the Taliban walk into the palace, it was like the barbarians had entered the gates. I was like, what the fuck? I was astounded that they come rushing in with their guns and they were sitting on the presidential's chair and enjoying fucking life,
I stopped and I asked some guys, what's happening? He said, I do not know. I saw tanks are driving toward the city, fingers on the triggers. Then I realized this may be a coup, maybe something. Oh my goodness, it's Taliban. So I drove back home, stopped my vehicle and took my guns off. And then I called my Taliban friends. What's happening? They said that we are at the gate of Kabul city. He said, please bring your car, pick us up.
I remember when I found out, I was uncontrollable, crying, and really first time, I feel so lonely.
This did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country.
I was shocked. I think the whole world was shocked. We spent so much money on training the soldiers. In the beginning, there were signs that they would really try to defend Kabul, but In the end, they just ran away.
د امریکایانو یا د فرانسویانو یا د نورو ناټو قواو چې دغه وسایت هم لیده دغه وسایل هم چې لیده موږ حیرانېدو چې دوی سره دومره مهمات دومره وسایل نظامي موجود دي او د طالب په وړاندې دوی جنګ نشي ګټلی نو دلته اوس د عقیدې جنګ و د هغې عقیدې کمزورې وې دلته خو مسلمانانو طالبانو جهاد یې کوو د دوی مورال ډېر زیات بر و ورځ تر بله به طالبان مخ په وړاندې تلل او دوی سکوت په حالت کې و.
There was nobody fighting. There was no rivers of blood on the roads. Everyone gave up. Everyone fled, you know. And the Taliban gave everyone a free pass and told them, if you want to leave, just leave.
هغه ورځو کې امریکایان په ایرپورټ باندې میدان هوایي کې وجود درلوده حتی داسې حالات به راتلل چې امریکایانو موږ سره همداسې به ننوتو ولیکن موږ خپلو معاهدو او په تعهداتو باندې ولاړو موږ په دغه ورځو کې بیا امریکایانو باندې ډز نه کوله تر څو چې دوی خپله عمله او هغه خلک چې دوی سره تلل خپل هغه تعهداتو کې چې امارت اسلامي سیاسي دفتر دوی سره کړی وي موږ هغې باندې پوره عمل وکړو تر څو چې امریکایان سالم بیا دې ځای نه ووتل.
Our mission in Afghanistan was never supposed to have been nation building. It was never supposed to be creating a unified, centralized democracy. Our only vital national interest in Afghanistan remains today what it has always been, preventing a terrorist attack on America's homeland.
The Taliban didn't really want the evacuation to happen as it did. They really wanted to negotiate with the government and this handover to happen. But Ashraf Ghani and most of his cronies and stuff just left. And it just left into massive chaos.
The airport got very chaotic, and then at the beginning of it, the landing was only 30 minutes and up. So what was happening at the first day, we had our plane, I think we only sent it back half full, and other planes were going back empty because getting a manifesto checked, paperwork ready, 170 Afghans onto a plane through that airport, to and through. There are some people that couldn't leave their house because they were a really high profile target. We manifestoed primarily women and children, and really the most vulnerable, the grassroots that wouldn't be considered for the NATO and the US flights. Let's just get as many fucking people out as possible. And there were a lot of recipient countries that they desperately wanted to get people out, and we reached a lot of people in that time. And it wasn't just the Afghan security forces or interpreters, it was government, it was professors, it was all sorts of people that believed in the democracy project, because there were plenty of them.
My God. I mean, a shit show is barely even covers what a disaster it is.
We didn't sleep from August 17th to August 31st. And I can give you an example of the stress. I mean, my eye started to bleed on the 31st, like just blood coming out of my eyes.
Just constant, every fucking day. More evacuation, more safe houses, more money, more visas. And it's just like, fuck.
A shocking bomb blast outside Kabul airport has killed at least 150 Afghan civilians and 13 American troops, just 5 days before the U.S. deadline to withdraw from Afghanistan.
So many people were trying to get out. We were even standing in the sewer for hours just to get to the airport gate. Some people died in there.
دویم چې موږ ډېر ودردولو هغه د امریکایانو آخري ورځو کې دښمني و اخر کې دا چې کوم افغانانو سره ظلم وکړو افغانان تیارو ته وخېجول افغانان ډېر بې عزت کړل دا موږ دپاره د افغان ټکی وه چې ټول عمر کې دغه بده خاطره به ما د ژوند پاتې وي.
If I think about evacuation, it is done terribly. If I compare this to the Russian took 1 year to go slowly and let the country for Afghans in a way, a bit right way. Americans don't really care about Afghans. They just betrayed and used each Afghan in our country as well.
We didn't betray them. I didn't betray them. You know, there is an argument that 20 years was long enough, right? But whatever you want to say about whether 20 years was enough or not, it shouldn't have ended this way. It really shouldn't have ended this way.
The evacuation from Kabul continued throughout August 30, with a steady stream of transport planes leaving Afghanistan as patrolling aircraft circled overhead. The US military completed their final takeoff 1 minute before the midnight deadline, bringing an end to the longest war in US history. The Taliban marked their victory with gunfire throughout the city, lighting up the night sky with fireworks and weapons.
Congratulations, we'll go in our operation against the occupation. If Americans act against Afghan nation, we keep them in target by our operation. If they want to secure their nation, they shouldn't act against Afghan nation. Americans are terrorist nation. They collect fund for killing other nations.
Around 124,000 people were evacuated in the past 2 weeks through Kabul airport, but many others were left behind. The Taliban were quick to celebrate with a parade showcasing the spoils of war taken from the Afghan National Security Forces, including heavily armoured MRAPs and even a Black Hawk helicopter. It's an affront to their enemies.
موږ په یو شی باندې خوشحالو چې د افغانستان د امریکایانو اشغال ختم شو. چون امریکایان په دنیا کې سپر پاور ځان ګڼه دلته د هغه چا د لاسه الله پاک د ناکامۍ سره مخامخ کړل چې هغه ډېر کمزوري خلکو.
When we just heard that we can get back to the university and our classes, I was really happy. When I get there at the university was not the same as it was before, because lots of our professors has fled from the university, and we have some new teachers, and lots of the restriction on women actually, that they just separated the times, they just separated the classes between the boys and girls, they just separated even the exit doors and the entry doors to the girls and boys. They just put some restriction on like wearing hijab, long hijab, and actually black long hijab to get the permission to enter the university.
The Taliban has suddenly ordered secondary schools for girls to close again, crushing the hopes of those who had eagerly attended classes for the first time in 7 months. After taking over in August, the Taliban pledged to allow education for girls, but the reality has been quite different.
موږ ښځو ته درناوی لرو. ښځه زموږ د جامعې د عزت ځای دی، مور ده، خور ده، ښځه ده، بچی ده. موږ تعلیم په سړو او په ښځو دواړو باندې لازم ګڼو.
دم خیلی خوشایند بود برام، با خدا اشک ریختم، اما امروز خیلی جگر خودم.
صرف د متوسطې د لیسو کار دی د لپاره هم مشران په ترتیب لګیا دي تر څو هغه ځایو کې کوم کمې بشي وي او دغه ترتیب برابر کی زمونږ بچي زمونږ خويندې
دا د اکثریت چې نیوکې لري وایي پسرلي کې واده کړي ولې په دغه خپل
او دا یو سطحي انداز باندې یو عارضي یو شکل به چې متوسطې اوس بندې دي ان شاء الله العزیز ان قریب د دې اعلان به وکړي چې دا به خپلو بچو په مخ به مکتب به ان شاء الله آزاد.
These thoughts of how many more girls are still like me are still there.
It's hypothetical, it's not a real story. She's a young girl in Afghanistan, she loves to paint, she loves to make art, but she now lives under the Taliban. What's your message to her?
I would tell her, don't give up. Stay with yourself, stay with your voice, and never lose your ambition. You seems to be very small, but you're very strong.
Women are protesting the Taliban's latest decree banning all female students from universities and colleges. It's another devastating blow for girls and women in Afghanistan whose rights and freedoms are being systematically eradicated since the Taliban took control.
I was like, I have lost everything. I have lost my hope. Even I was not looking to my books because I was thinking that it is something useless. What is important is to leave Afghanistan.
Yes, I like the Taliban's rules. We travel day and night without any tension. So we have no tension. Like now, the Ministry of Interior, he said that if you want permission for weapon, a gun and stuff, we can give you.
This has 2 triggers. Yeah. One is for the warning. Yeah. A second is for the firing.
Ah, so you have to press harder.
Yeah. So when you press like that, then it goes automatically. Pop, 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 pop.
It shoots more than one?
Yeah, automatic.
Ah, it's automatic. So you work as a journalist, and if you have any problems, you can shoot people.
Not people. Enemy.
What everyone expected, which is the slaughter, the looting, none of this happened. 15 years I've been traveling to Afghanistan. I've never seen Kabul like this. It is a absolutely wonderfully peaceful city right now. Shit. I knew it. I knew it.
Hello, nice to meet you in person.
A movie star. Do you want an autograph?
Women are not allowed now to exist without a man in their life. So no, it's not peaceful. Afghanistan is not okay if you are a woman. It is not peaceful, it is not safe, it is not free.
Another very good thing is it's significantly less traffic. Significantly less traffic. Look at this. They were very, very quick to put this on the walls. By the way, girls are going to school, yeah? It's this bullshit that girls cannot go to school. How are you? Hi. Girls are going to school.
I think it's always important that when any white male has an opinion as to what's happening in Afghanistan, it's going to be different than any woman. So when any white male says, well, things are relatively good, no, fuck you. It probably is to you because you have freedom of movement. And no woman does, so fuck you.
This idea that all of a sudden now a country like Afghanistan should just kind of peacefully transition itself into a developed democratic nation, it's absurd. And so nation building, going in with a military and deciding that you're going to help that nation build itself up so that it can be something like you, ultimately, it's about how much can you take and exploit that nation in the process.
I don't consider what I did to be a nation building. One, that feels so big compared to my small little projects, but also I always tried to look at it through the lens of, would I do these projects in my own backyard? Would I do them in any other country? I thought of Afghans as my equal. I wasn't doing these for Afghans, I was doing them with Afghans.
You know, we said Afghan-led and Afghan-owned for years, but I always felt it was very much lip service. It needed to really be Afghan-led and owned.
Okay, so there's this term that's being used a lot that we're trying to use as part of a theme for this film. It's called nation building.
It's not nation building, you know. It's a kind of prison building, or it's a kind of like controlling other nations, controlling everyone. That's not a nation building.
Are we just going to keep doing this? Like, this is what we do? We just keep shitting on other countries and then walking away, and then shitting on another country and then walking away, and creating this refugee problem, but then saying, well, we don't take refugees. It's so abhorrent. And it's a grief mingled with just rage.
The Taliban is painting out the history it rejects and substituting its own version, whether Afghans like it or not.
And now you have a government in place where 17 of the 33 cabinet ministers are on UN sanctions lists as terrorists, and several of which are on the US Foreign Terrorist Organization list. The cherry on the top is the Minister of Interior, Sirajuddin Haqqani, has a $10 million FBI bounty on his head. And by the way, the Haqqani network, killing countless Afghan civilians, also killed about 80% of the NATO troops, right? You're not going to be able to give this government money by law, by international law, by national law.
As Afghanistan struggles with a fractured economy, the foreign reserves that could potentially rescue it are sitting in an American bank. US President Joe Biden says he will release half the funds to Afghanistan, with the other half to be allocated to victims of the 9/11 terrorist attacks.
They took all the money, and what they're doing now? They are gonna distribute this money, our money, Afghan money, to their people. Do you think this is fair, what they did?
Those people of the United States who lost their lives in America are clearly victims on that day, the day of 9/11. The Afghan people have been victims for a much longer time before the incident or the tragedy of September 11 in New York. And we have been victims since then as well. The Afghan people are the owners of the money. And the United States of America must not be punishing the Afghan people, a people that they called allies and friends.
Why should you give the Afghans money to the victims of the 9/11? It's not your money. It's not bin Laden's money. This money is belong to the nation of Afghanistan.
After the whole war on terror, right, all of these Western countries made all these laws about how you can't give any money to what's deemed a terrorist organization. And the Taliban were a terrorist organization, so suddenly everything gets frozen. As far as I'm concerned, just take them off the list. Take them off the list. Everyone will be like, no, but that's legitimizing the Taliban. It's like, yeah, but it's also meaning that they can have their money. And Afghanistan will not be starving.
We trained and equipped an Afghan military force with some 300,000 strong. We spent over $2 trillion.
think about the egregious amounts of money that went far. It went to Dubai, it went to Canada, it went to the United States, it went to Netherlands, it went to the UK, it went to Germany. But it didn't go to Afghanistan.
It boggles the mind that a country in which the international community dumped, and I say dumped, so much money over the past 20 years, achieved so very little.
ټول ولس طالب دی اوس په یو دفعتن واحده باندې موږ ټول افغانستان باندې الله پاک برلاسي کړلو امارت اسلامي د انتقام جذبه نه لري دغه شل کلن نظام خلق پاتې دي موږ ټول په وړاندې د امارت غېږې خلاصي دي تر څو موږ مثبت نظرونه ورکو د خپل د موجوده نظام نه ملاتړي وسو تر څو یو پایدار حکومتداري پاتې شي یقینا موږ چیرته چې موږ نه سهو خطا شوي وي موږ د خپل د ملت نه معافي غواړو
Well over 50,000 Afghan civilians were recorded having died in the war. 66,000 Afghan security forces, countless maimed with injuries for life. And about 3,500 NATO allied soldiers died in that war in the 20 years.
امریکایان په ټوله نړۍ کې اچا سره د دوستۍ او د پایدار دوستۍ تعلقداري اچا سره نه لري خپل اهداف یو ځای کې ګوري هغه چې ترلاسه کوي نو بیا نور باندې خپېږ دی وځي
One of your souvenirs from your trip to Afghanistan, wasn't it?
Many souvenirs.
Just tell me what it is as you show it to me.
Yeah, so this is the Taliban flag, and 2 days after Taliban entered Kabul, street vendors were offering this for sale at every corner of Kabul, and that shows you how flexible the Afghans are and how quickly they adapt.
Afghanistan has a new flag, the 30th time it's changed in just over 100 years. This white flag, stamped with Islam's declaration of faith, replaces the black, red and green stripes so many Afghans have fought and died for.
We are in a huge economic crisis now. No jobs. The people with money and the foreigners have left.
Do you speak English?
And we're still flying people out. So this is a domino effect, and I don't know how many people are affected by the withdrawal.
Right.
But this is the result. No more work. Well, I'm not dealing with the Taliban as a client, and they are not my client. My business model is supplying protected vehicles to tier 1 customers, to embassies, to NGOs in hostile environments. At this point, I am not looking at doing business with the Taliban. Danke! Danke für jeden Tag der Liebe. Danke. Thank you very much. Bye. Bye, everybody. What we need to achieve in Afghanistan is that the people find reason to stay in Afghanistan, and that means we need to help them create jobs. Peace is there. Now we need jobs.
So all of these foreign countries, all of these Western countries put all this money into the country, and then all of those people that got trained and got supported and are the people that are really going to help make the country move forward, or however you want to put it, then those same countries evacuate all of those people to their countries. It's less about the Taliban, and it's more about the way the geopolitics have played out to where now all of the best artists that I know, that I worked with over years, are not there anymore.
Indeed, we do not have a budget. If we call the university teachers, school teachers to come back and start your work, that means that we have to pay them, and we don't have budget for them. We are under sanctions of the US. I want those Afghans back in my country. So this is my country, even if it's a good situation, it's a bad situation. I have to live here, I have to work here. Leaving Afghanistan is not a solution.
منګه کله چې امریکایانو 9/11 باندې دا پیښه وشو نو طالبانو هغه وخت کې د هغه وخت رئیس جمهور ته ویل چې راځه په منطق موږ سره خبرو وکړه.
The Taliban actually surrendered in 2001 to the US, but the war continued on, and what can I say is like this war could have ended so much sooner than it actually sort of led on to be. So what were they fighting for?
I've always been a hopeful person. I've always believed that Afghanistan will find its way and its people will find its way. I'm very glad to be part of its history and to see where this country goes.
The war is over. It's quiet, it's peaceful, and this is a fantastic basis now for all parties to look at what can be done for Afghanistan and for the Afghan people.
I think we will wake up to it. I mean, you can't leave this government in place unless they do change. Change in action. I'm sick of rhetoric. I don't believe anything anyone says anymore. They change in behavior, and behavior comes with real things like delivering services, bringing the talent back, having a development plan, you know, an infrastructure plan. Well, how are they going to govern? If they can start to do that, then people will assess that they should get off the sanctions list. I haven't seen that, but it is early days. I don't have a lot of faith.
If we destroy countries and create poverty, we aren't the good guys when we come in and distribute aid.
من هیڅ چانه د انتقام نیت نه لرو. من د خپل د مشرانو هدایتو باندې سم کار کوو ترڅو ملت دغه 15 کلن بد تاثر په ښکلې یو امن او د آرام فضا باندې وګوري.
The ways in which the work got done needed to change, needed to be different. I clearly don't have all the answers of how that is, but when you look at the way in which development enterprises work, even just international development in general, boom, we're gonna do all this stuff right now, real fast, tons of money. Had that water been poured more slowly,
The Taliban have shattered our dreams. They are stripping away all the things women have fought so hard for. High school are still closed to girls, and now they have banned women from university as well. They have banned us from working in most professions in workplaces. They have banned us from working for humanitarian organizations and NGOs. They have banned us from traveling without a male guardian. They have banned us from doing sports. They have banned us from visiting parks and eating at garden restaurants. They have reduced women to shadows, and now they are trying to silence our voice.
Hey, Travis, you make me laugh. You've got the watch, I've got the time. You say the urban legend. At the beginning, nobody was talking to the Taliban, you know? There's no fucking way a U.S. military commander walks up to a Taliban in 2001, like, the Taliban says, you got the watch, I got the time. She thought it was a rural, like a Pashtun proverb, and it's not. It's freaking been repeated for 20 years because of the whole idea. It's true. And ultimately, this thing will end in failure because you got the watch, I got the time. So it sparks an emotional reaction because it leaves you thinking, this is mission failure, right? What are we doing here? Like, yes, it's profound. Yes, the saying sparks an emotional response because you're there and yet you know ultimately this isn't going to end well, right? And the profound part for me is that it's so reflective of the 20 years there to just pass around a bullshit saying for 20 years, you know? It was never actually said. But think about it rationally. The Taliban walking up to a U.S. commander just after the Taliban put fucking planes into the buildings hurt the biggest superpower. There was no talking between a U.S. military commander and a Taliban in 2001. Nope. I don't think it happened. But I'll pursue. Okay, I gotta go. Bye-bye.
Sorrow wasn't right from the heart. Our sorrow story wasn't heard.